Recently, I said, you said, Jesus, I did not say that. I said, you said that and I heard it.
That's an example of unhealthy. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if your heart's in a bad place, it's not the time.
We haven't had any disagreements since yesterday. Welcome to the Grace Marriage Podcast. I'm Brad Rhoads.
And I'm Marilyn Rhoads. We're here to help you build a marriage that's stronger, more connected, and full of grace.
I'm Rick Dayton, joining Brad and Marilyn as we bring you weekly conversations designed to inspire and equip you to live intentionally in your marriage.
We'll share practical tips, powerful stories, and strategies to help you and your spouse grow closer and thrive together.
So whether you're just starting out or have been married for years, there's always room to grow. Let's do this together. This is the Grace Marriage Podcast.
Sometimes there are going to be disagreements, and when that happens, it often will work better if there are sort of rules of engagement. What is fighting fair? How do you go about having a healthy disagreement? We're talking about that today on the Grace Marriage Podcast. I'm Rick Dayton, along with Brad and Marilyn Rhoads, and we are delighted to bring you an episode that's talking about some of these hard things. And it's almost like we go into the situation expecting that at some point there's going to be some bumpy water, right? You get in the raft, you know that you're putting in up here, and we're going to go down the river, and it's rated as a 5 as far as the white water that we're about to hit. And the first couple, you kind of bobble along, and that wasn't all that bad. And then all of a sudden you're saying, we're coming up here, and the guide says to you, you better make sure you paddle, or you're going to end up out of the boat, right? We can't wait until we get to that number 5 before we figure out what's the best way to stay in the boat. So how do we go about setting up guidelines, Brad, that for a disagreement, what is a healthy way to disagree? Is there such a thing?
There is, and we have done healthy and unhealthy disagreement, and I think we still jump in and out of that deal. But it is understanding how to navigate disagreements and how to navigate it when disagreements get unhealthy to get you back to the right spot. Because, becoming a perfect communicator, if the book of James is right, it's not going to happen. Right. And Scripture says, if you get married, you're going to have much trouble. So you're married, so you're going to have trouble. I've had couples come in counseling. I said, so y'all are having troubles. You're biblical.
So, troubles of biblical proportion, right? So how do you decide what's fair? How do you decide what's the way to disagree? Because you come from a different perspective than you do. Mm-hmm. You came from a different family than he did. You may have grown up with girls as sisters. He maybe grew up with, whatever the dynamics are, it's not the same for both. So how do you make a decision that you both can live with, you both agree with?
Oh, well, you're not going to agree on so many things. Like you said, we are so different. And even if two people are a lot alike, just the fact that they're male and female, you're going to bring a ton of differences in how you hear there's so much. So to have some rules of engagement, I love your example of the boat, making sure you've got the paddle and things. So having a few guidelines are so helpful. For example, not making you statements, pointing fingers. It's so natural to do that when you're frustrated with your spouse. You instead using I statements, like I'm feeling this way. Also to not talk in extremes, using absolute statements like you never help me or you always do this. Those are comments that are going to trigger defensiveness right out of the gate.
And you're coming at from maybe a counseling standpoint too, that not only what you said, but what the other person hears, right? What they internalize.
Yes.
And when you're feeling hot, like when you're feeling like when you want to speak the most, you need to speak the least.
That's right. Because
why do you say always and never stop? It's because you're kind of ticked off. You're kind of wound up. So let yourself wind down before you speak. I've always, as a lawyer, I always thought if I can write a 2-page letter in 5 minutes, I don't need to write it.
Mm-hmm. Because there needs to be more thought that goes into it.
And I need to calm down because it's being driven so much by emotion. And it's being driven so much by negative emotion. Negative emotion drives fast speech because you've got so much going on here and you're so frustrated and you're so offended. That mouth can go quick. Let the peace of God rule before you speak. My mentor used to tell me, had a conflict with somebody and I wanted to address it. He said, I won't let you address it with them until you have a tear in your eye. And every time we'd hang up, he'd smile and go, still not ready. At one point, he said, I wish we could run the tape back and listen to yourself for 5 minutes. because we sometimes we don't realize what we say when we're hot.
Right.
Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if your heart's in a bad place, it's not the time to go to your spouse. So it takes patience to slow down, spend time in prayer. If you'll do
But
that,
you're also
calm
not saying
down.
internalize it and hold it in.
No,
right?
just wait till you're not in the heat of the moment. Those are the worst times to have healthy disagreement.
Yeah,
it's
count
not
to
going
10,
to be healthy
right? It's
in
a
the heat of
count-
the moment. Right.
Yeah, it's a count to 10 kind of thing.
So those are a couple of the rules. There's more too. Just also, I think we miss hearing each other. That's the step that we naturally miss. Brad and I still trip up here regularly and have to be reminded, okay, wait, I want to make sure I'm hearing what he's saying and understanding what he's saying before
Do you
I share
repeat
my
then
part.
what he said in terms of if he says something to you? Do you say, "Okay, let me make sure that I understand this"? Are you going to that stage?
That's a great practice. That's another good
I
point.
mean, make sure that what he says is really what you heard, or that you heard what he didn't say.
That's
Sometimes.
exactly right, because we hear very different things. There are times when, especially if it's something important, to clarify, so what did you hear me say? There are times he's heard something completely different than what I thought came out of my mouth. So when it's an important issue, it's really important to do that very thing.
Yeah. Recently, I said, "You said, Jesus, I did not say that." I said, "You said that, and I heard it." So it was like, but to your point,
That's an example of unhealthy.
and
You went to your Ring doorbell and you then played it back and said, "This is what you said," right?
and grace covering the whole deal. I mean, because even we haven't had any disagreements since yesterday, and we're in a good spot today. But Grace covered it, and Marilyn just does life differently than I would do life.
Right.
She doesn't.
And Brad does life differently than you would do life.
But that's
Yes.
an understatement.
Yeah. So let's do this. I know that you've put together so much curriculum, right? That there's a lot of stuff that's out there. And we're going to link to this in the show notes so you can go back through and you can look at these things and have a little better understanding about the basis for having literally healthy disagreement. But do you do it in a step by step? Do you say, okay, we need to start out by praying together about it, and then we need to start doing this and doing, I mean, do you do it that way, or are there just general guidelines that you've put together as part of the curriculum?
Well, both. We do have some stuff in the show notes that'll give you just a really nice structure to follow. And kind of the longer you are married and the longer you work at being able to disagree without it turning into a fight. Because when we do crisis counsel, so we can't talk about anything without fighting. We can't talk about the kids without fighting. We can't talk about money without fighting. Any little thing will jump into a fight.
Yeah.
It's because they really haven't learned how to disagree. And a lot of it's just let each other be each other.
Yeah.
Marilyn is different than me. And I just got to accept that, and so she makes some decisions as it relates to what she does with her time and family that I probably would go about it differently, and vice versa. But we've gotten to a point now where we appreciate each other as opposed to get frustrated about each other because we're different from each other.
Right, right. I want to go through some of these in terms of the rules of engagement here. And you basically have sort of listed about 8 different things here. And the first one is to cover every step of the process with prayer. You start by praying. Is that together or is that separately? Do you have a recommendation? Because some people are comfortable praying with their spouse. Other people, they want to be more one-on-one with God. I mean, what do you recommend?
I recommend first, because usually one feels offended and one doesn't. They might be oblivious to it. Maybe not. But I know if Brad does something that has bothered me, I first need to pray. I need to pray. I need to get my heart in the right spot before I go talk to him about it. So I usually pray by myself. And Brad, I think, does the same. And what I do is sometimes it's a little thing that I just need to let go. And that's where grace rules on the little stuff. We so get caught up sometimes in things that don't matter that much. But when we're over the edge and stressed out, it's the little things that drive us crazy. So praying, sometimes you realize, that really wasn't that big of a deal. I just need to let that go. But if it sticks with me, and then I'm figuring out, okay, I want my heart to be in the right place because I want to work for us. We're not against each other. We accidentally fall into this feeling that we're against each other rather than we're a team. Let's come at this and attack this issue as a team.
And if you do pray together, don't pray, "Lord, help my spouse quit being irrational. Lord, help my spouse have a softer, more humble heart. Help my spouse love her husband more effectively.
Help her spend less money."
Help convict her every time she walks in a store to honor her husband. Make our credit card not work.
Yeah. Let's go back to using I statements, because you mentioned this, and Brad, I want you to say a little bit more about it, because I think what you're saying right there, sort of in jest, is absolutely spot on. That it needs to be, this is what I heard, this is what I felt, this is what your words said to me, and it's not a you, but it's a me, right? It's using the I statements. Why is that so important?
Because if somebody leads off with you, it feels attacking and accusatory, and it creates a natural, like a defensiveness to it. But if you use I statements like, I'm struggling with this, I'm this, it doesn't feel like you're accusing the other person. Like a lot of times when somebody's trying to make a perception, it's taken as a judgment. Like if you say, you did this in parenting, they might take it like, you think I'm a bad parent. You know, like I think you're an amazing parent. I think that when you use the I statements and not the you statements, you want to make sure you don't come across as attacking, condescending, or accusatory.
Right. We've already touched on the issue of using extremes and how we need to avoid those when it comes to these sorts of disagreements.
Always avoid extremes.
Yeah, there we go. He says with his tongue firmly in his cheek. What about not panicking? Don't panic in the middle of these situations, because sometimes emotions are part of it. Oftentimes when emotions are up, that's when we may say things that we regret the most later on. When you say don't panic, what's that look like?
Oh, well, we can be in panic mode just when we have more on our plate than we have time to do it. So that's an example when I jump into unhealthy communication with Brad. And so I did yesterday. Had a lot to do, more to do than time to do it. So that's when you get kind of short with each other. And I made a decision that he disagreed with. So had more to do than time to do it. And our daughter wanted to go to Holiday World and needed a ride there and back. And I thought, well, I'm going to be gone the next 2 days. I want it.
We've got plenty of time to add 2 hours and 40 minutes of driving to our already packed day. Yeah. So that will work well for Brad and I.
Yeah. Well, but at the same time, you're also looking at it saying it's something that your daughter wanted to do, and there's something that you knew that she would enjoy, right? So you're kind of torn between both worlds.
Right. And I'm going to be gone the next couple of days. So made a plan, and I'm feeling a little panicked. And Brad's like, what can I do to help? And I said, well, do you really have time? Because I'd love it if you'd drive Rachel and her friend to Holiday World.
Yeah.
And then
just
go,
like, what?
And then go pick them up.
Yeah.
but if I think of it like in a healthy way, Marilyn really wants to serve our daughter.
Sure.
You know, we've had a lot going on.
Yep.
Marilyn wants Rachel to have a good day yesterday while Marilyn's doing a lot done. So if I choose to think of it from her perspective, that she wants to feel like a good mom. She wants to love Rachel well. She wants Rachel to have a good day. She's doing all this stuff around the house all day. And I can think, okay, I get it. I understand it. When I just think, okay, I'm really busy and they just have 2 hours and 40 minutes of driving on me, but the thing about Grace is we can laugh about it today. You know, would I have agreed to drive her to and from? No, she'd been watching Good Luck Charlie.
Yeah. Is that still on?
Oh, yeah. Some Disney
Reruns.
From don't panicking to being gentle.
I want to go. I'm back on the don't panicking thing a little bit. When you have a disagreement, a couple will make it like that's our whole marriage. I mean, it's like
they terribilize and awfulize. Is that what you mean?
Oh, yeah. It's like they have a disagreement and they fight about it. Well, they're dating once a week. They're having a great time. They're doing a lot of things, and they have this one disagreement. So I'll be in crisis counsel. I said, "Do you like each other? Yes. Are you devoted to each other? Yes. Are you loyal? Yes. Is there any infidelity? No. Is there any abuse? No. And I said, and you've got this disagreement, right? I said, well, y'all aren't in crisis. You just think you are. I mean, in the whole picture of your marriage, you're great. But a lot of times a disagreement will blow up and it will dominate their entire mind and their entire heart. And they'll panic and think their marriage is a lot worse than it is. Told a couple recently that came in for crisis counseling. I said, my conclusion is, hey, you're not in crisis. And they turned around and gave each other high fives. They said, oh, cool, we're not in crisis. I said, no, we'll help you work through the issue.
Yeah.
But you're not in crisis. But
where does that idea come from? I mean, is it because we watch Suits on Netflix and we think that we see something that happens there, and so we see that happen in our relationship, and we know what happens on down the line? And do you see? I mean, how do we say, well, it's really, really bad because all the drama around us is there?
Well, we have an idealized view, like things supposed to be. we don't supposed to disagree. Well, yes, you came from two different families. You have two different perspectives, and you don't communicate perfectly, neither one of you. Yes, you're going to have difficulties. That's normal. Like one of our guests said, it made me feel so much better when I realized that we disagree, and so does everybody else.
Yeah.
So
you're not alone in it.
And over time, you grow in it. Over time, you grow in it. We're certainly not perfect, but we're certainly a lot better than we used to be. And having some unhealthy things and it really helped us get better at disagreeing over time. The way to get really bad at disagreeing is to never disagree. So there's people that don't like conflict, and they'll refuse to ever conflict. And it really prevents intimacy and prevents connection, and it prevents growth and the ability to communicate because they never practice.
I think another piece is we've got an enemy that's coming against us, and he's the great accuser. So when you have a bad day, you hear these lies in your head, like, man, y'all can't even get along. You can't even communicate. You have a marriage ministry. You know what I mean? Lies come into to Brad, everybody, and we talk to couples, and they start writing this narrative in their head that's not true and believing it.
And we get the wrong perspective of ourselves. Like yesterday, my wife's not thoughtful to me. She doesn't think how it affects me. None of that's right. That's just wrong.
Yeah.
What's true is my wife is crazy about our daughter, loves our daughter, is the best mom I've ever seen.
And needs some help because she's got too much going on.
And I offered to help.
He did.
I offered. I said, if you're going to offer to help and do something,
you better be ready to help.
And don't complain about it when you're done. Because that's what I did. I said, I'll be happy to. I just hope this helps you. Then I complain. I can't believe you made me do that.
Yeah. But you're also not remembering for the rest of the day something that you didn't get done that you thought you needed to, et cetera. Right? I mean, you have to. If you say yes, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
And I had the time. I had the time. Right. So it was like, I don't know. We just. What causes fights and quarrels among you don't get what you want.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to just kind of chill yesterday afternoon. And when that didn't turn out to be the case, I got a little frustrated.
Yeah. Gentleness is one of the fruits of the Spirit, right? And that's one of the ones that's right here on your list of rules of engagement too. What's that mean? What's it mean to be gentle?
Our tone, we don't hear ourselves so often. How we come across.
My wife says that to me all the time. I think what I wrote down, if I wrote down what I said, it's not that bad. But the look on my face or the way that I said it, she said, that's the thing that's I'm guilty as charged.
Well, body language, just without saying a word, our body language can show so much as well. So if you've let yourself calm down before you talk about an issue and you've prayed about it, then your body language and your presentation is going to be a more gentler way. And then that's so much easier to hear than in a strong, harsh tone.
And it's so important to manage life well, because if you've got more to do than time to do it and you're always pressured, stressed people struggle with gentleness.
It's so true.
People with margin and quiet time and extra time and they're exercising, it's not as big a challenge, because you abide in me and you'll bear much fruit. But if you're so busy doing all your stuff, you don't really abide in him. You're not going to be able to bear the fruits of the Spirit. When I'm least gentle is when I'm having to put my nose down and go full speed to get everything done. And then I don't really think about relationship.
Yeah.
And it's gentleness, my struggle, because Marilyn tells me it is.
Well, and when I'm in a hurry, that's when the fruits of the Spirit go out the window. They just do. You're not as gentle and kind. And
roll up the window when you're in a hurry.
Yeah. The idea of seeking to understand, I think all of us long to feel heard, to feel understood. And yet you're looking at it from the other side, that you're seeking to understand. Rather than, I'm pouring all this out to you, instead what you're doing is you're saying, I want to know. I want to understand. Help me to, understand better. You're coming at it from a different perspective, aren't you, Marilyn?
I think this opens the door to hearing a different perspective. If I feel like Brad has heard me or I listened to Brad's perspective, then I'm ready to hear a different idea. It's so important. And the person that feels, I know that's the most important thing to me in a conversation is if I feel heard by Brad. I just want, and so that means
affirming, right?
It's affirming.
Yeah, right.
So before he shares a different perspective, if he asks more questions, this is what I heard you say. That is so nourishing to each other's souls when you do that. So, and that's the, you hear me? It really is the step that is so often skipped and why people stay gridlocked and frustrated in their talk.
And when somebody's really interested in you and like, tell me about, what's going on in your life, how do you feel, everything else, you can tell that's really how you convey love, because you're really interested in somebody else. If I'm really interested in Marilyn's perspective, interested in knowing, it shows I care about her and want to know her and want to know about her.
Another thing, if Brad comes to me and is sharing an issue, it's just natural to get defensive. It's natural. It's our knee jerk. And so rather than responding, just ask questions to understand where they're coming from and wait. I don't know what book it was in that said, wait 15 minutes. If you just wait 15 minutes after someone's given you constructive criticism or shared something, you'll already be calming down within 15 minutes because you're starting to process it and think about it. But in the moment, if Brad is sharing with me, I just naturally want to, share back. But if I force myself to ask questions, it keeps us from going to that bad spot.
Yeah, usually the longer you wait post-emotion to talk, the better. Mm-hmm. And there's been times where I've waited to talk, and by the time I was like,
what were you going to talk about?
And why am I making a big deal out anyway? It's like, I've had it times before I wanted to talk and didn't, and by the time I didn't even care anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right. But when you do go, if I go to Brad and I've waited and my heart's in the right place and I share this issue, it's still natural for him to get defensive. So that's when he really does need to ask me questions and not share his perspective yet till
to de-escalate the situation. Right. Yeah, to de-escalate. I had somebody on a talk show that I did a couple years ago, and he was a fascinating guy because he was talking about interpersonal communication, and that so often we get so caught up in what it is that we want to say next that we miss the last 2 or 3 or 4 sentences that the person was saying, right? That you said something, I can't wait to say this. I can't wait. And we interrupt, that we jump in before you finish fleshing out what it was, that maybe you're going to then turn around and say, you know what? And that's why what I said was wrong. This is what but we jumped in there because we couldn't wait to say. Not interrupting has to be one of these key factors, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Did you bury the lead here? It seems to me that's got to be, these aren't necessarily in any order. It's not more important than praying or using the eyes. But this to me, I think is huge, not to interrupt.
Well, it says in the Proverbs, a wise man seeks understanding. A fool loves to hear his own opinion. To what you said, a wise man loves to listen and learn. A fool wants to interrupt and interject his opinion because he's more interested in being heard than hearing.
Right, right. Is that hard to do? Is it hard to sometimes just sit back and you don't want to say, are you done? Because then that can also send a message that's not helpful, right? Yes. But is it hard to do?
It is hard to do. It is hard to do, but it gets easier. And when you both have waited, when Brad comes to me and his heart's in the right place, it's not that hard to hear. I do want to know his perspective. I do want to know if I'm doing something that's offensive that I don't realize that I'm doing, or if there's something that I could do that would be helpful to him or encouraging to him that I'm not doing. I think it's so important that I think all of us would say we want to help and encourage. We are on the same team, but so often couples live at odds that want to be.
Right. Well, and active listening is the last thing that's on that list, and we really have kind of touched on that throughout the previous 7. That has been a very big part of these rules of engagement that are out there. If you really feel like your marriage was meant for more, Grace Marriage is there for you. And if you want to know more about it, again, the show links will have more on these individual topics that we've talked about here. And Brad and Marilyn and I will be back together next week. Again, make sure you tell other people you know about Grace Marriage. Check out the website, share this with them, link, follow, share the podcast as well, so more people will be able to gain the same kind of understandings that you're getting from being here for our podcast. We'll see you next week right here on Grace Marriage.
Thank you for joining us on the Grace Marriage Podcast. We really hope you're feeling inspired to take intentional steps to grow in your marriage.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us spread the message of grace and reach even more couples.
And if you have a moment, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a lot to us and helps others discover the podcast.
To learn more about how you can grow in your marriage, visit us at gracemarriage.com. Keep building stronger, grace-filled marriages.
We'll see you next week on the Grace Marriage Podcast. Until then, keep growing in grace.